Hello, and welcome to Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is the good doctor, Philip McKenzie. And today, well, we got 2 UFC-less weekends laid out before us. It doesn't feel like we really have to talk about anything. I mean, I don't know. Phil, did anything significant take place last weekend that you really want to talk about, or?
I think there were some fights that we can dig them up, some regional stuff that we can probably break down, and then, we can go.
Oh, a guy I've been following pretty closely, actually, Tony Martin. He had a big win.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't actually see the whole fight, but didn't Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov have a fight?
I think they might have had more than one, and not necessarily with each other.
Yeah, yeah, with multiple people, often at the same time. Well, of course, you've been waiting with bated breath for this episode to drop, dear listener. We are experiencing still the aftermath of UFC 229 with its main event, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor. And, there were a lot of fights. The whole card was pretty damn fun to watch, pretty much from top to bottom. Quite a few big upsets. But really, it was all about the main event, as we said last week. And, man, 2 things were probably going to happen in this fight, Phil. And for most of it, one of them happened.
Yep. So this was, it wasn't a fight that had it was very much the 2 true outcome fight.
Yeah.
And everyone knew this from the beginning. So, I don't think we need to talk about it much. So I think it's going to be just time to get into what the people really came for, which is the analysis of the efficacy of the double flying stomp. And, how do you really get weight transfer into your punches when you're sitting on top of the cage?
Yeah. I want to talk about the technique of how you intertwine your toes in a guy's hair so that with just one flap of the wings, you can carry him off. No, but for real, it was a good fight. I thought it was, not a ton of momentum swings, as we knew. One thing was going to happen or the other. I'm personally pleased that we got to see some of the other. Like a big part of what I think set this fight above just being another Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, but with greater stakes, was the really impressive rally that McGregor put on in the 3rd round. So at least we got to see a bit of what McGregor would have done had he gotten the fight he wanted, while Khabib seemed more or less to be taking the round off and making McGregor work. But man, I don't think this is like you can't call this shocking because the level of domination here, because we knew this about these guys, that when they win they tend to crush and just keep crushing until either the final bell or the finish. That is particularly true of Khabib Nurmagomedov, and nor do I think that Conor McGregor is maybe he's not the last guy I would have expected to get out wrestled by Khabib. He's certainly the most dangerous on the feet before that, but he's certainly not the last guy you would expect to get out wrestled. So not a shocking turn of events. Do we want to touch on the the post-fight aftermath now or later? It does feel like
we'd probably better just get it out of the way, right?
Yeah. It feels like the sort of cloud hanging over the entire affair, doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean, people shouldn't really expect MMA fighters to be moral paragons, but there's certainly something to be said for some kind of baseline professionalism. So what Khabib did was, I don't know if I found it vastly offensive, but I did find it extremely stupid.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction. It was not like moral revulsion. It was funny, right? Like, people online were like, he didn't have the respect that these guys had, and showed a picture of Conor and Nate Diaz together. Like, Do you have any idea who Nate Diaz is? Like, Khabib did not invent when keeping it real goes wrong. In fact, Nate and Khabib's whole squads got into a scuffle a couple years ago at a World Series of Fighting event. So, yeah, like, this is not the first time something like this has happened. And it wasn't surprising that it happened either. Like, it's also, like, it's hard to be that upset when you know, like, this is sort of the response Conor McGregor wants to provoke out of his opponents, the way that he talks to them and tries to wind them up, and he hopes that has a positive outcome for him in the actual organized fight. But there's always a possibility, when you're talking to a guy from, like, a war-torn country with an oppressive government who is, like, a religious fundamentalist, that maybe you don't realize what kind of response you are actually provoking from that person. But seriously, like, if Conor would have won and jumped the cage and given John Kavanaugh a slap, or not John Kavanaugh, boy, that would be funny. If he had jumped the cage and given, like, Javier Mendez a slap or something, would that have been a huge surprise either? Or a great moral outrage? Like,
yes, it would have been a great moral outrage.
He's done lots of that shit.
What's that?
He's done lots of shit like that,
Yeah, and people are outraged every time. But, like, it was, like the Dolly incident, this was incredibly stupid apart from in some ways, even not really necessarily in a commercial way, because I'm not sure if Khabib's getting his money from the fight from after this, but Khabib will be much more popular after this than he was before. People are going to be much more likely to tune into his fights, even if he's not fighting Conor. And if he's fighting in Conor, then it will be insanely popular.
Yep, he picked up about 4 million Instagram followers since Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and if he doesn't get paid, then I'm sure his lack of a patron means that he's no longer quite as independently wealthy as he was. But I'm sure it will not be difficult for him to find another.
He'll get paid. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Like, it's just a matter of waiting for this to blow over. Already, since the night that it happened, people are just more on the side of, like, joking about it and referencing it. Like, they're already over the outrage. It's,
it was dumb.
It was dumb. That was the main thing, is that, like, when McGregor did it at the Chad Mendes fight, it was because he was challenging Jose Aldo, and he didn't jump on Jose's head. Like, not saying he wouldn't have. Again, the moral equivalency between these two guys is not that hard to draw. But he wasn't challenging, like, the guy that hangs out with Jose Aldo and desperately wants to be him, but very clearly isn't, which is who Khabib was attacking. So it did just seem like a dumb move more than like an outrageous one to me.
Yes. Oh, allow me to crush your tiny clones.
Yes, sometimes these things happen in MMA. Oh, boy. All right, so the fight itself. Let's talk about it. One of two things was going to happen, as we said. Were you surprised by anything that played out? Were you surprised by how quickly Khabib did, in fact, get McGregor down, for example?
Yes.
Yeah? Low single, kind of what I was expecting, right? Just like, he almost got kneed in the head for it.
I was expecting that, but I wasn't expecting the first one to work.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. I mean, so it's partially that, Conor's stance with the leg out in front makes it a little easier to latch onto the low single. He can't really pivot away quite as easily as someone else would be able to. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it's just that Khabib is fast as fuck.
No, Phil. I've actually been told on the internet that he's not actually a very good athlete.
Yes.
That right hand he threw, Conor saw that coming because it wasn't incredibly fast.
Yeah, no, it was all. What are you talking about? It was all technique. It was.
Yeah, it was a very perfect.
Look at the form behind it and how, like, effectively it draws the shortest distance between 2 points. Yeah. It's not there's no athleticism there.
You're right. Khabib is insanely quick. It really showed up in this fight. Like, there were moments that McGregor always managed to shock you with his hand speed at certain points, but there were a lot of moments like in that third round too, after McGregor started to come back, where Khabib was not doing much, and then out of nowhere he would just throw 2 punches, and they were twice as fast as the shit Conor was throwing at him at that point. But the first takedown was very quick. The reality of grappling a guy like Khabib is like it might take a lot of energy for him. It might affect him down the stretch, as I think it did here somewhat, to keep fighting for that takedown, because it was the first shot that led to a takedown right off the bat. But it did take quite a bit of scrambling and fighting. The thing is like if you can't undo whatever grip he has on your leg or your body, you're fucked. Like, you cannot just stop the shot and hope to slip out. He is going to maintain a grip. He had one arm wrapped around McGregor's leg after that first shot. Just kept it in the crook of his elbow, real tight, and did not let go. And so, like, no matter how good, sort of like the shit we talked about recently with Kevin Lee against Tony Ferguson, how he had, like, one arm in an awkward position but just managed to throw Tony to the ground and reverse him. If you cannot unhook that one grip that Khabib has, you're not going to complete a positional transition. Like, McGregor tried to get on top of him at one point in that scramble, and it just didn't matter. Because 30 seconds later, Khabib had him down because he never actually undid that control. And that was kind of the problem until the third round every single time they wrestled.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Conor's defensive wrestling was good. I mean, I think this has always been an element of his ground game, is that he makes. I've never thought that he has a particularly deep or complex ground game, but he just has a very good ability to select the right option. He's very calm, and he doesn't do stupid things on the floor. And in this case, it was him. He did pretty much the right things as soon as Khabib got in on him. He sprawled on the shot, and then he kind of tried to move around on Khabib. He tried to get on top himself. He tried to stand up and turned it into a regular single leg and tried to get his foot on his shin on the outside and hop away. And he kind of just got. And the thing is that at all stages, he was basically doing the right stuff and waiting to see if Khabib was going to go, punch, pass, or switch his grips or do something that would allow Conor to escape. And Khabib just didn't. He was just like, I'm not going to shift grips until I'm absolutely guaranteed to be that I'm in a better position. Like, I am not going to make. He literally made no errors. So, like, very little happened in that first round from an offense standpoint. Khabib got nothing, got very little done for the majority of the round, but it did not matter because Conor had zero chance of standing up. He just got, eventually, he got pushed to the cage. Khabib grapevined his legs and then just started to slowly push his way up. And then Conor had to realize, like, I can't get away from this guy's ground game without being the one who takes the risk.
Yeah. And that was kind of my concern going into this is like, no matter, I don't know. The first round was always going to be pivotal. We knew that. But like the moment Khabib started having success, it exacerbated the horrible situation that Conor was in. Like, it just got worse and worse and worse exponentially because now he's, like Khabib is, even when he's not a pressure fighter, like he just thrives on having initiative. If you have to react to him, he's perfectly satisfied to cling to a position and just maintain control until you make the mistake. If you're reacting, chances are you're going to make a mistake if you're feeling that pressure. And like, even in the third round, as the fight progressed, like he was making Conor work. I think it was like he was constantly having a strategic advantage. And I think that was kind of how this, I don't know, in a sense, how this fight might always play out. This is why I talked so much about the attrition beforehand, because like, even when Conor was having his way, the fight as a whole was sort of slipping away from him. And starting from the very first round, like he did have some good defensive wrestling reactions, but he just like Khabib doesn't mind like not turning in a super exciting round. He just wants you to be fighting his fight. and reacting to him and playing by his rules. And yeah, just a completely like crushing performance.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like there's... The thing is that when we have a style dynamic like this, it immediately generates feelings of inevitability in the rematch. I mean, for a rematch, or, you know, this guy always would have done this because it's so one-sided. You're just like, I mean, if they fight again, does Khabib really get his first takedown? Like,
that's my point. I don't think it matters, right? As long as he's still holding on to you, he can fail 4 takedowns in a row in the first round. Conor's still going to be more tired than him.
Yeah, but like, if Conor is... So at least part of it has to be that, like, I think that Conor simply was not prepared for how fucking fast Khabib is. Like...
Who has been?
Yeah. That he is... Yeah, as we said last week, he is lightning fast. He is... I mean, he was about as fast as Michael Johnson, who is now a featherweight and was probably the other fastest person at lightweight. He is just lightning quick and incredibly strong. But, you know, I still think that you can't allow this to kind of obviate his flaws. You still can't be like... I still don't think that, like, hitting a low... Like, this is the thing, is that when he fought Al Iaquinta, right, he did that to Al Iaquinta. Right, he just teleported across the ground and grabbed a low single, and then for the rest of the fight, it's the takedowns came a lot harder, and it's not that he entirely stopped throwing them, like after a while, and so the thing is that when you get someone with a low takedown single, there's one narrative there which is like, holy shit, this guy can take someone down from a low single just off converting a grip on their ankles. And another part of it is like, can you take people down without, like, in open space, without just lunging in on a low single, without setup? Like, is that your open? Is that how do you take people down in open ground without that?
I think it's certainly a question to continue asking about other opponents. Like, somebody's got to be able to test Khabib, but it does feel like, because again, like, it's a combination of factors that makes Khabib so successful, isn't it? It's never about the first takedown. That's one of the strongest ways in which he compares to Ronda Rousey. He's also like, Khabib is really just the ultimate evolution of like Hani Yahya, where it's just like it's extreme grittiness and it's relentlessness is what leads to his takedowns. It's not about the first shot. I think he very rarely finishes the first shot. And I do believe in the Iaquinta fight, like, the takedown was harder than he expected, but he was like, he quickly realized, all right, you know what's easier? This guy's boxing has pretty much completely shut down because he's so nervous about the takedown. I'm just going to jab him because I'm faster.
Yeah.
Which was fine. It worked just fine. I think that in a matchup with Conor specifically, failing on takedowns is still a strategic victory for Khabib. Because even when he's failing on takedowns, Conor's having to defend them. So diving in recklessly, like on the slim chance, there's always a slim chance he gets knocked out coming in. The very first low single, Conor almost caught him with a knee. But if he doesn't, then at the very least, he's likely to spend a good portion of the rest of the entire round having to fight off that takedown, and he just can't do that for as long as Khabib can, you know? That's the question that people have to answer when they fight Khabib. It's like, can you stop his first takedown and the next few and still be winning the whole fight while doing that? Or do you throw it all away in the effort to not get taken down? Because it's really right. It's like the threat of the ground game is the problem, much more so than the actual wrestling. There are people who could out wrestle Khabib, I think, in this division, but I'm not sure how.
I don't know if there's people who could out wrestle him. There's people who could be competitive, like it's basically Kevin Lee, and I think that would be.
Gleison Tebow still exists, Phil. How dare you forget his name?
He's not in the UFC anymore, though. They had to protect Khabib. No, I mean, I think Kevin Lee could. It would be an interesting matchup between him and Khabib. He's not as fast, but he might be stronger. And
even the stamina might be an issue, right?
I don't really have any. I think Kevin Lee's stamina has only really faded in when he had that insane staph infection.
Yeah, fair enough. And Khabib does have the relative stamina, just like Lee. So, like, it would be interesting to see who would be shattered from grappling with the other guy, because they both tend to do that to their opponents.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a great performance from Khabib, obviously, one which was, and it shouldn't be overshadowed by the stupidity afterwards and anyone saying like, oh, he should be stripped. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, but, like they're gonna do that anyway. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, and he didn't. And to his credit, he didn't rely on. He didn't just go back to sticking with the takedown. He knocked Conor down with that right hand. And the thing is that as Conor realized he had to take more risks, he started putting himself into Khabib's positions. Khabib started to be able to progress to mount, and I thought Conor still did a good job of. This was the thing, like, Conor did a good job of neutralizing those positions. He did a much better job defending the wrestling, but then again, Khabib did a better job striking, and that's one of the cool things about MMA is that it is MMA, even with these defined style matchups. You find these guys, performing in areas you don't expect them to, much better than you thought.
Well, it is the classic MMA matchup. And it brings to mind, like, one of the classic examples of, like, Randleman Crow Cop. And there are others as well. But, like, you get the guy really, really anxious about the takedown, this kind of thing happens. And, I agree. Like, I don't want to give the impression that I didn't think McGregor did well. It's just that I don't think he was ever going to out-grapple or out-wrestle Khabib. So, like, no matter how many good decisions he made in those phases, he was in those phases still fighting Khabib's fight much more than I think Khabib was fighting his on the feet. There's just
I'm just thinking that, like, I'm not sure of a fight where Khabib gets the very, very first takedown he tries is necessarily how I think it would go every time. I think it's still an interesting close fight between two specialists, but in those fights it's just going to look like, because I think Conor could probably hurt Khabib, and then Khabib could go for sloppy shots, which would be easier to stuff and get out of the way of. And that would also look like if Khabib was hurt and panicking, it would also look like a horrendous one-sided, you just can't get the takedowns, this guy's too good for you. I think the physical disparity was the thing which did stand out to me the most, even though I mean, it might just be because that was sort of what I expected to see. It's just that Khabib is much like just a naturally more. He's just like, as I said, he's just a better athlete than him. But that might be personal bias. It just seemed like he is faster, stronger. That seems like the hardest barrier to overcome.
Yeah, and it's a great combination of technique and strength. Like to know to immediately grab your leg and then stick it against your chest is great. To have the strength to completely cling on to it and never let go from that kind of position is another thing. Well, what do you want to see out of these guys immediately after this then? Because I don't think anyone's clamoring for a rematch right away.
Apart from Conor.
He's already mentioned it more than once.
What do you do with Conor, right? Because he has to main event whatever card he's on.
But you got to rehab, right?
Weird, stupid obsession with having championship fights on the cards.
Yeah.
So now do they try and make 165? Because I would really rather not. I mean, not for that reason. But
I didn't even think of that, dude. Like,
yeah,
they're gonna feel compelled to give McGregor a title fight.
Yeah, because I don't know, like they are obsessed with having these things be championship fights.
Oh, we'll get to bitching about Shevchenko versus Eubanks. Don't you worry. The UFC's sickly fucking addiction to pointless title fights at the cost of their own much more interesting matchups.
I mean, if they're that cynical, they should do Poirier Diaz as a 165 title fight.
Yeah, maybe McGregor had that in mind when he was mentioning 165 at the press conference.
And I mean, Khabib. So, like for Khabib, I think the most deserving challenger is Poirier. Like, if he beats Diaz, and I think Diaz shouldn't get a title shot if he beats Poirier, but I think Poirier should definitely get a title shot if he beats Diaz. Would
you even want to see Nate fight Khabib? Like, I know exactly what would happen. I have no interest.
What? Khabib would get boxed up.
Yeah.
209.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah, he would throw Nate into space.
Yeah. Did you see what RDA did to Nate? Not to just rely on MMA math, but RDA greater than Diaz, Khabib greater than RDA in the same kind of shit. So yeah, I have no interest. Yeah. If Poirier loses, then Ferguson, undoubtedly.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically my thoughts.
Yeah, man, I didn't like the really interesting question to me is what goes for Conor next, because like Khabib he's the champ and he has an incredible win and he's going to be bolstered hugely by this and have a ton of rep and will just fight whoever the best challenger is. For McGregor, like, God, the mere thought that they are going to feel compelled to give him a title shot is sickening to me, because I think like. It was mentioned on maybe by James Kimball on Twitter that they could do something like McGregor Pettis, like I would like that. I would like a tune-up that's a non-title fight where it doesn't really mean all that much, but it'll definitely be fun, because there are certain requirements for a McGregor fight. Like he's got to be putting on fun fights. He's got to be fighting names that people care about. I think Pettis still qualifies, and clearly still has it in him to put on some entertaining performances, like something like that.
Yeah, the alternative is that we get, Conor Anderson Silva.
Yeah, or if God,
I'm not saying that's something I want to see. I don't.
It is on the table though.
Yeah.
Or like McGregor Diaz 3, of course, is always an option. But like, frankly, just give the dude a normal ass fight. That's fun, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing is that there's. Anthony Pettis' recent record is very underwhelming, and Conor's a huge style nightmare for him, and it would be an absolute shit kicking. But the alternatives are just all really good fighters who would be incredibly threatening if Conor didn't just completely fuck them up. Like, he's got a huge chance of just knocking Tony Ferguson out immediately. But like, if he doesn't,
then he's got a huge chance of being in a living nightmare where
Kevin Lee,
yeah,
exactly the same situation. Like,
Khabib without a chin, though, there is a chance there.
Yeah, but Khabib also with like much longer arms and even more damaging on the ground.
The long arms would be a problem. Yeah. So okay.
So there's tough fights for him. I mean, probably the best scenario all round is that would work out is well, actually, I don't know. It doesn't work out for everyone, but it would be something like Poirier wins, fights Nurmagomedov, Conor Diaz 3.
Yeah, that works.
And sorry, Tony. And then I don't know what you do with Tony. I'm sorry.
You let Tony fight Justin Gaethje.
Yep, sure.
For pure insanity's sake.
Yep.
All right, that works.
Done it.
It turns out it's really easy to make compelling matchups at lightweight.
Yeah, that's because you can throw everyone together and you're like, yes, I would watch that.
Yeah, basically. All right, well, that's the main event of UFC 229. Khabib Nurmagomedov absolutely had his way with Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor, some bright spots in there, but certainly not his fight for the vast majority of it. And after this, we're going to take a quick break. And after that, we're going to talk about, the co-main event, Tony Ferg versus Pretty Tone Pettis, Dominic Reyes, a light heavyweight prospect that, Phil, I'm perilously close to allowing myself to get excited about. And Derrick Lewis, whose balls was hot, after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about the co-main event of UFC 229, Phil. Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis. Has Tony Ferguson upgraded by now getting obliterated almost in the second round instead of the first? Is that a step up?
Who asked us this on Twitter? That was a great point.
Did somebody?
Yeah. They literally said, like, have they stepped up? Has he stepped up by pushing it back? And the answer is no. But man, that was just a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it was always gonna be. I mean, despite my overwhelming cynicism beforehand,
your shocking antipathy to this fight.
Well, it's just because I just don't. It's just. I just have to sigh when I think about it. Listen, people, all right, being cynical is fun, okay? It's not just a matter of being disillusioned by this sport, which you should be disillusioned by, but it's also just fun to bitch. Yeah, it was, I mean, based on what we talked about last week, what I think probably most people were expecting, in fact, it was kind of exactly the fight it was always going to be, wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
Tony Ferguson put a lot of pressure on. That was fucking kryptonite for Anthony Pettis. Very, very keyly, last week, you pointed out specifically Anthony Pettis' underrated right hand. That was the weapon that sent Tony Ferguson down in the second round. Then there was more pressure. And then Duke Rufus made the surprising call to call the fight off when Pettis broke his right hand, which I felt like was a great call. I mean, I don't think he didn't make it in maybe the best way. He still went over to Anthony and was like trying to get him to decide to give up. He was like, it's up to you. What do you want to do? And it's like, Anthony was like not saying, I want to quit, but he was clearly not feeling it. And like, to me, if you're a really, really good coach, you just see that and you're like Trevor Whitman with Nate Marquardt.
Yeah, Trevor Whitman is exactly what I was thinking.
You're like, nope, okay, it's over. But at the very least, he realized after asking for a bit that Anthony, I think, didn't really want to fight. Pettis would absolutely never give up. I know that for certain. But I think he could tell he wasn't feeling great. And the right hand was, a convenient excuse to give his fighter an out and to avoid more punishment. But also, I thought, very good tactical reasoning. Because what did Anthony have to answer Tony Ferguson's pressure other than that right hand? Cartwheel kicks? You know, like he doesn't have fundamentals to respond to pressure fighting like that. So he's got to just bean Tony with the right hand again. If he can't do that, he's just taking punishment. So I thought it was a very good call.
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't all that much to say about it because, it was a fight which was fun. Like the main event, it was fun and more competitive than it had, than like perhaps we might have expected, purely because like Tony Ferguson is clearly a man for whom not even just his, I mean, because his basic defense can be pretty okay sometimes, but also sometimes he just decides that he's going to do things.
He has no system.
Whoever is in front of him,
yes,
like, and what they want to do instead, and he will just like, it will be time to spin and salsa dance and throw huge like unguarded kicks, and yeah.
If Tony Ferguson were an anime character, he would periodically scream, "It is time to spin," in the midst of attacking his opponent. And I would enjoy it. Yeah, he just, like, his style is kind of baffling. I mean, not kind of. It's fully baffling. It's weird it's sort of like Thiago Santos' style, where like a few weeks ago I described it as a baffling combination of good decision-making and shit-eating wild man. Like, that's kind of Tony Ferguson. Like, the pressure was a good idea, obviously, but he was being relatively intelligent in how he was selecting his shots with that pressure. But then just every once in a while, he would just like sort of drunkenly sway back and forth trying to spin for no apparent reason and get hit right on the chin. And I don't know.
I mean, he is just, a man who is just incredibly high on his own supply of being Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
And
I don't blame him.
I mean, this thing, but he is a smart fighter. Like, this is why it was relatively easy to pick him to win this fight because he fights. He is like in his own completely nutso way. He has really good fight IQ.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about he's fought a lot of people in different, utterly insane, but very strategically appropriate ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, he fought Gleison Tibau, and he actually kind of fought a bit of an outfighting performance against a guy who was extremely powerful, but kind of plodding. And he didn't just bum rush Gleison Tibau because that hasn't worked for even people like, RDA or Khabib have had serious troubles. Just, you don't go head to head with Gleison Tibau.
He made Tibau chase him, basically. Kept him on the end of his reach. Very intelligent boxing-type performance.
Yep. And then he rushed down Edson Barboza, which is why you could be confident that he would do the same thing to Anthony Pettis. And, when he fought RDA, he didn't fight a full-on pressure, meet me in the center of the cage fight, but he just kept a steady stream of volume to keep RDA just at the point where RDA's punches had lost their snap. Like, he's crazy like a fox.
Yeah.
He is a smart, completely insane fighter.
Even if just in the realm of pressure fighting, that he can do both what he did to RDA, which is sort of a gradual positional pressure, like just pressure of proximity, but also do what he did to Pettis and Barboza, which is insanity, crazy pressure, just knowing you cannot give the guy a second to breathe or think, and make both of those work. But yeah, like the sort of funkiness of his style maybe disguises the stylistic adaptability he has. He can do a lot of things, and it's not just in terms of throwing a lot of weird-ass techniques. He can fight a lot of different ways.
Sorry, I'm just watching the knockdown again. He just runs up and does like a raw inside leg kick and then just gets clocked. And his defense to all that is just to like break dance.
Yeah, people were describing it as doing Dark Souls rolls.
Yeah, no, it's exactly like that.
Video game defensive dodges. Yeah, very good. Oh, Tony Ferguson. Just one thing I wanted to raise, actually, one point. Somebody mentioned this to me. I don't know if this is the case, but I'm still trying to theorize why Tony Ferguson is the way he is. So this stuck in my mind. Somebody last week, I think on r/MMA, mentioned that Tony Ferguson said somewhere, I haven't confirmed this is just bad broadcasting, but he said somewhere that he hasn't sparred for like 4 years. Now, A, I don't know if I can believe anything Tony Ferguson says. B, I'm not 100% sure he said that. C, can that be? And is that maybe why he gets shocked by a big shot every single time he fights?
I don't know. Like,
how do you explain the style of, like,
how do you get good at fighting that way?
Right? Maybe he's got his like wacky Zen mindset where he's making like, maybe he's like, listen, I'm going to take more shots in my fights, but I'm too insane to be knocked out. And at the end of my career, I will have saved myself a lot of cumulative damage. Maybe that's his thought process.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe it's just all tactical insanity, but strategically, in the depths of Tony's mind, there's just this, calculating businessman Lex Luthor figure who's just sitting there like going, "Yes, Tony, you will not spar at all because our level of self-awareness is far too high. You are a complete fucking lunatic." It's just like, yeah, I just don't think I'm going to spar much.
Yeah.
Just because I'd be incredibly encouraged to just try and, spend entire sparring sessions like integrating capoeira, salsa dancing, and Krav Maga.
Well, like, you see all the weird shit he does in his training camps. Like, does he have time to spar doing all that?
That's a good point.
He's got so many bizarre workouts to do. I mean, there's hardly enough hours in the day. I don't know. It would be. The Tony Ferguson needs glasses thing is my usual angle, but also the Tony Ferguson doesn't spar is another potentially convenient explanation for his perpetually slow starts, despite being an intelligent fighter. I don't know. He's so fucking weird. But okay. Why don't we take one more break, in fact. Short little segment 2 here. When we come back, we're going to get to the other 2 fights from this main card, maybe share our brief thoughts on any other things that stood out to us. But mostly we're going to be talking about Dominic Reyes, who had a career-making, or, at least a name-making win over Ovince St. Preux, and Derrick Lewis, who, was Derrick Lewis after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about Dominic Reyes and Ovince St. Preux. Phil, we were both extremely concerned about the experience of Ovince St. Preux and how we had no idea how Dominic Reyes might respond to a second round, for example, or an opponent who could perhaps lay back and counter him or out-wrestle him, perchance. Dominic Reyes looked like the veteran in this matchup for the most part, I thought. I thought this was a sensationally strong performance from him.
Yeah, this was great. This is far more encouraging than it would have been if he'd just come out and just booted OSP in the head and knocked him out like he had everyone else. This was really encouraging to see.
Yeah. What stood out to you about Reyes' performance? I mean, I think he approached the fight like strategically perfectly. Like OSP didn't really know how to use, like his experience was just not useful. He just ended up kind of stalking after Reyes a lot, and all of his old habits, like not knowing how to throw combinations, and such sort of bit him and didn't allow him to get any foothold in the fight almost from the very start.
Yeah. So one of OSP's major issues is that he is incapable of leading. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't really have much of a jab or a setup strike or much of anything. Is that he's just he's normally just kind of waiting for them to fall into whichever counter straight he's willing to throw from whatever stance he's in. Or, potentially he'll just, his main weapons from a distance are just generally just raw kicks. Mm. So he's not, and so this has kind of come back to bite him a couple of times in that he can be made to wait for shots and basically just backed into the cage, as in the Jimmy Manuwa fight. But so I mean, what I was impressed with from Reyes is that he knew his distance very well, and he never broke it with. He never broke out of that distance with big moves. He kept his grappling fundamentals were pretty, they weren't incredible, but he never made the incredibly stupid decisions that you expect from a light heavyweight prospect.
He just made really good decisions.
Made his way back to his feet as soon as possible. He dug for underhooks. He didn't go for a guillotine, which I was terrified that he would do.
Yeah, I mean, I think good decision making is sort of the defining characteristic of this fight. Reyes just, no matter what was happening, just made good decisions. He kept pressure on OSP, but chose largely to counter him. He stuck OSP in this dynamic for most of the fight where he didn't know how to lead, and it turns out that maybe one of the worst things to do against a counterpuncher is to throw single power shots with no setup, and not have any follow up either. But also, I was really, really impressed for such an inexperienced fighter, how well Reyes maintained his fundamental skills, stayed in his stance, kept a nice guard, kept himself lined up with OSP while he was managing the distance and not allowing OSP to get too close to him for any reason. The simple fact that he was countering with the jab, not even all that much, but just every now and then OSP would get the idea to step in before throwing a shot, and Reyes would just meet him with the jab and then recreate the distance. He just it was like a veteran kind of performance. It showed like really well-schooled striking skills and enough takedown defense to at least overcome OSP's massive strength. So,
yep. Yeah, nice jab, nice counter right hook as well. Like when OSP did like throw his left hand, that was often kind of there waiting for him. Mm-hmm. And he understood that when OSP was, whether it's just because he knows that when people are backed up against the cage, he only really turned it up when OSP was backed into the cage, and OSP wasn't going to be able to throw the backstepping kind of counter that he tends to like. And you're just like, when this guy's backed into the fence, he's really just a big guy without much defense. Mm-hmm. Like, I can really tee off on him at this point.
But never recklessly. Like, still chose his shots really well, was moving his head while he was punching. Like mixing up his targets, I'm still interested to see Dominic Reyes in a fight where he doesn't look like he's in control the whole time. Like, that's still something I have to see. But the fact that he was able to seize and maintain control without making any notable mistakes to throw it away against a fighter as experienced as OSP is, I think, huge. The problem, Phil, is that he called out
nowhere for him to go.
He called out Jan Blachowicz afterwards, which is suicide, as we know.
Yeah, you don't want that magical smoke. Like,
Reyes, with this level of striking skill, like, to be real, just to drop the facade, he could probably beat Jan right now. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's not certain, but it's likely.
Yeah, it would be a very hard fight to call.
It would probably be a great fight.
I think he might be able to, like, to be honest, even though he's only really won one-round fights, he might be able to win that just on pace. But it would be very interesting to see. I mean, he's immediately established himself as one of the best strikers in the division by beating this really not very good striker.
Well, that's all there is to beat,
but
mostly.
That's all there is to it, yeah. Like, but yeah, so I mean, and it's nice to see actual, genuine, and and he basically knocked OSP out at the end as well. I mean, you couldn't ask for more, and it's incredible to see like actual, genuine light heavyweight talent like him and Rakic. Like, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll still see with Rakic, but
yeah, they both look like they might actually be genuinely, legitimately good.
A light heavyweight who kind of knows how to box. Like,
shocking.
Like, plus all the defensive, all the lame parts of boxing that, like, our favorites like Alexander Gustafsson tend to eschew. Yeah, shocking is the word for sure. All right, well, speaking of shocking.
Speaking of Alexanders.
Yes. Speaking of Alexanders who make very good decisions, let's talk about Derrick Lewis.
This fight was awesome.
This was the most Derrick Lewis fight a Derrick Lewis fight has ever been. This was the defining moment of his entire life.
This man has had some Derrick Lewis fights before.
Yes.
Like, he has had some really Derrick Lewis fights before.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the defining fight, just as most of his fights have been. Because, like, no matter what, no matter who he fights, no matter what their build is, like 90% of the time, a Derrick Lewis fight happens. Which means he does nothing, gets beaten up, gets really tired in about a minute and a half, and then randomly knocks the other guy out. That's what happened.
It was amazing. Like, this is the thing, is that, like, in these kind of scenarios, you look at the guy and you're like, I see, maybe we're talking some kind of Yoel Romero situation where actually, you might think that this is all random craziness, and maybe there's a plan underneath it all. And then you're just watching it, just like, no, not true at all.
He's barely surviving from one moment to the next.
Yeah, it's the fact that his defensive moves against any strike is to curl into a ball.
Is to try to cover whatever that strike is targeting with both hands.
Yeah, and to just curl up on the feet, like
yeah,
so it looks like he's close to getting stopped, and then he'll just like get out of it and then just sigh and look like he is having the most miserable experience of his life as he gradually plods around the other guy. He's just like watching Gulliver in the land of the Lilliputians. He's just someone of just incredible, insensate physical gifts who's just been forced into these fights where he has utterly no interest or enjoyment in completing them. And he's just being pecked away at by these tiny mortals until he accidentally knocks them out.
It does add a layer of it adds a certain shading, I think, to Derrick's his post-fight interviews, where he is always like sighing. He's like, shit. Like, he never had that good of a time, you know?
No.
It does emphasize Derrick Lewis has heart, man. Like,
oh yeah,
all of his fights go terribly until he wins. And he almost always manages to win despite how terribly they go. He never learns. He never adapts. He tried for some takedowns in this fight, which I suggested last week might be a move for him. But
his takedowns, they were so good.
They were like, I'm sure there's a name for this kind of shot, but he tried to tabletop Volkov. He tried to drop to a knee, place one knee propped up behind Volkov, and then sweep him over the top of it with his arm. And he tried that takedown twice. 3 times, because I just saw another attempt where he, watching the footage now, 3 times actually. One of them he really bailed out because he was very, very tired. But like, that's how Derrick Lewis's game evolves. He is the ultimate MMA as a video game fighter too, where it's like his idea of adaptation and improvement is just, and getting more technical is just to learn a different weird technique. So like, there was a flying head kick in this one. There was 3 takedown attempts. All of them were that one weird takedown. He didn't have any other options. But you know what else happened, Phil? Volkov tried to wrestle with Derrick Lewis. And this is the other thing about Derrick Lewis's fights, is that he's not alone. He can't accomplish what he does by himself. Derrick Lewis needs the heavyweight division as much as the heavyweight division needs him.
Sorry, I'm watching one of those takedowns.
Derrick needs the heavyweight division. And so the mere fact that everyone he fights tries to take him down and then shatters themselves in the effort, or does well and then for 30 seconds gets reversed and beaten up by Derrick Lewis on top. Like, Volkov, I have to emphasize this. Volkov is like maybe the best striker heavyweight has to offer right now in terms of like how his game works. And it's not that good, guys. Like, he's like a worse Alexander Gustafsson, essentially. Because he can't wrestle. His defense might be even worse. I don't think he even has Alexander Gustafsson's gas tank. And, like, Gustafsson would have thrown a lot more jabs. You know, he would have really made his reach a problem. And Volkov, like, I don't know what he was doing in this fight, man. I don't know what he was doing. He just kept thinking he had to overwhelm Derrick Lewis and knock him out.
Well, this is the thing, right? Is that people strike with Derrick Lewis, and his reaction is to cringe away, hide, and act like everything is completely fucking him up. And then they wrestle with him, and he's terrible at it. So they're like, okay, I just need to, I can do these. And they just somehow just naturally fall into this, like, this idea of, like, I've got to fight a full spectrum MMA fight against this guy.
Yeah, because he can't do any of it.
So I should use everything. It's like, you fool! That's his plan all along.
Just the trick is to just do one thing over and over. He's not going to learn what you're doing and adapt to it. Or just do the one safest thing you can do. If Volkov could redo this fight, honestly, he would win this fight 90% of the time if he just used those front kicks and jabs.
Right, he's just like, I'm going to get back control on this guy. I'm a 6'7" heavyweight, and back control is really hard to get out of when that's the case.
Yeah.
And then Derrick Lewis is just like, I'm just going to stand up and throw you off me,
Yep.
and then punch you a few times.
Yep. Yep. And by the end, Volkov had no capability whatsoever of making good decisions, because when Derrick Lewis was making his final rally, you know, seemingly certain in his heart that he was about to win the fight, because why wouldn't he be? Volkov tried 3 times in a row to catch him with a counter knee to the body. Each time he responded to the big single shot from Lewis by dropping his hands, leaning back, and thrusting his hips forward while having one foot on the ground. There is no accounting for heavyweight decision making. There just isn't.
So we did say last week that like there was a chance this was going to be like a terrible, awful version of Gus Rumble, and it really kind of was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because Gus was winning that fight before he decided to throw a completely raw front kick after being told to throw a raw front kick.
Yep.
But like this was just like, as you said, multiple times in a row, when his only chance is hitting you with the biggest shot that he has. It was fantastic.
You
Derrick
don't have
Lewis.
to try to counter him. You're not Dominic Reyes, Volkov. Don't try to counter Derrick Lewis. Just poke him. Oh. Okay, well.
And then that's the thing, like, now Derrick Lewis, he must be next in line for the... He's only got 2 options.
Is he?
The winner of DC Cormier or Stipe. Those are really the only people he can fight. I mean, I guess he could fight Curtis Blades.
Doesn't it feel cruel at the end of the day? Like, we know there's a hard ceiling on what Derrick Lewis can do. I mean,
Is there?
He actually, okay, imagine this. Stipe has to wrestle him. That's the obvious decision to make. Stipe wrestles Lewis, who is exhausted within a minute, but 10 minutes later, they're both exhausted. And then Derrick Lewis gets on top of Stipe. Yeah, actually, I think there is no ceiling. It's just like, if you're not as smart a striker as Mark Hunt, like literally, Mark Hunt did what everyone should be doing to Derrick Lewis, which is just to pick him apart. He's not good at anything. He's not. Oh, I love him so much, man.
Yeah, like, I mean, but I can only hope that now that he wins the UFC heavyweight championship.
Yeah.
Like, in exactly that kind of fight.
Yes.
I need to see it. I need to see him just get absolutely, like, fucked up by Daniel Cormier. Or, I mean, so maybe, like, the most likely, actually, thinking about it, the most likely outcome from Cormier-Brock is that Cormier wins and then retires, right? So it's got to be Derrick Lewis-Stipe for the vacant belt. There we go.
Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry, much as I like Stipe, I have to see him just fuck Derrick Lewis up for, like... four rounds and then 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and then just for an extremely sad looking Derrick Lewis just knocking the fuck out.
For an extremely sad looking Derrick Lewis to knock him out.
Like, just a man just having the worst experience of his life.
Just having an awful time. Oh my God! Thank you so much.
How are you going to defend after this, Derek? Like, what an incredible fight! It's like, man, I don't even feel like I need to be. I don't even feel like I deserve this belt. I need to get back on the elliptical, and then just make some incredible like statement about what he's going to do with his wife later on. Mm-hmm. He's the champion we deserve.
I thank you, universe, for providing Derrick Lewis. Because honestly, like I said before, it's fun to bitch, it's fun to complain. Derrick Lewis fights offer me everything I want out of this sport. They really do, which is like the opportunity to badmouth and critique and just be like a whiny ass. Because it sucks the whole time until it doesn't. But also the opportunity to see insane violence and dramatic comebacks every time. He's everything, man. God, I love you, Derrick Lewis. I love you so much. All right. Well, that's a good note, I think, to end this episode on. UFC 229, worth watching. It was a lot of fun, and that includes the aftermath. I think as time goes on, we're just going to have more and more fun with the memes and the memories of the insane shit show that took place after the main event concluded. If you missed it, I did a live cast, a Heavy Hands live cast, where I did basically some color commentary and analysis while the main card was playing out. I have yet to do it as we're recording this, but by the time you hear this, it'll probably have some timestamps and stuff attached to it. So if you feel like rewatching the event with alternate commentary and were forced to listen to those slatterns, Rogan, Cruz, and Anik, while watching live, then go ahead and check that out. That's on the Heavy Hands YouTube channel, which is where you are quite likely listening to this episode right now. Let's see. Before we wrap it up, we have an open week or two ahead of us. 2 open weeks, in fact, right?
I think so.
Well, this is one of them, right? And then there's one more week after this, but that week will end with Volkan Oezdemir versus Smith. So, obviously we're already hyped about that, but we're thinking of doing probably some kind of topic or something in there, maybe talking about this new 165-pound division idea. So stay tuned for that. We always like to take advantage of having just a little bit of a lapse in the schedule to talk about something other than the whatever the UFC is nonstop churning out. But until then, Phil, do you have anything you would like to plug this week?
I've got a toe-to-toe review of the main event, which I will be doing with my partner in crime, David Castillo. So we'll be trying to write that over the next couple of days. Not too much other than that. Probably still looking at doing that piece on the UFC's kind of media strategy and how it reflects on the UK with Callum McCarthy, but yeah, that's pretty much me for the moment. What about yourself?
Cool. I don't think I have anything concrete planned. I'm definitely going to be doing something this week, but I don't know what it is yet. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Maybe talking about where somebody like Conor McGregor goes next. Maybe talking about something that isn't Conor McGregor or Khabib Nurmagomedov, in fact, because last week I did 2 articles on that, and I'm glad it's over with. I just want to think about Derrick Lewis now. Maybe I'll write an article. Maybe that's what I'll do, Phil. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yep.
Just a breakdown of the unbreakable pattern of Derrick Lewis's career.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds kind of fun. All right.
I'll need more Black Beast technical breakdowns.
Yeah, that sounds kind of fun. All right, well, don't get your hopes up, but hopefully that's come out or will be coming out soon at the time you're listening to this. And until then, and until next week, thank you guys very much for listening. If you want to find us online, you can do that on Twitter. That's the easiest place of all. Phil is on there at Evil Greg Jackson. And you can find me at Boxing Bush with a B-U-S-C-H on the end of that. And find our respective works, pieces of writing. And I'll probably do some more video breakdowns and stuff in the future now that the YouTube channel is active by necessity again. So you can find all of that kind of stuff on bloodyelbow.com. And until next week, thank you guys very much for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.